Hi there, my name is Katya. I graduated the Art Institute of California, Los Angeles in 2011 and to date have over $150,000 worth of student debt. I have decided to create a content series in the form of a podcast and video to record my experiences and hopefully bring on others to share what it's like to be under the thumb of insurmountable student debt. I hope that what you see and hear imbues you with insight and solidarity for those of us suffering under a crippled educational and financial system, and maybe someday hope for those of us who deserve student debt relief. So, thanks for being here, and now that I've said all of that, let's get started.
Oh,
All
hello.
right.
I didn't see you come in.
Well, so first, I just want to get on the record. Can you give me your name and also your pronouns?
My name is Chad Odell Roberts, and I'm he, if you couldn't tell.
And just thank you, right? I'm gonna have my fake beard. And I thank you just for being here. You're kind of my first guest, first person I've spoken to, and I'm. We haven't seen each other in years, pretty much since I graduated.
Yeah.
So I'm just.
We've only
tickled to
Facebook
see
seen
you.
each other.
I know, isn't that crazy? I feel like I don't know how it's been for you. Do you stay in touch with people from school?
I do. This is relatively new as far as going on camera and talking, even though for the last 2.5 years, that's what most people in the world have been doing. My
Yeah.
wife and I have been thinking about doing maybe a YouTube channel where we do goofy, weird ass things and talk about it on camera, but haven't really set that up. This is literally my first opportunity of setting up a tripod with my camera and my mic, and it's not even my new camera or my new mic. I'm just lowballing it here, but so yeah. Other than that, no, it's just been texting people, and there's maybe about half a dozen people from school that I still stay in touch with or regularly, comment on their crap on Facebook.
Secretly judging you, loudly judging you. Really quick thing. Could you, I could feel you breathing on your mic. Is it really close to
Probably my
you
fan
or?
over there.
Oh, maybe it's your fan. Could we adjust it just so that we have less breathing noises? It's like, you have animation people together. We just start goofing off.
How's that?
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. We had like some
Now all I
free
have is computer
ASMR at the
noise from
beginning.
over there.
Okay. So you mentioned before we started recording, you started at what age did you start the school? Tell us what school you went to.
I went back to school when I was 45 to the Art Institute in Santa Monica. And this was after I used to own my own business. I used to own a costume shop in Redondo Beach. And then September 11th, 2001, pretty much put an end to the party industry that year. And tried to keep it going for as long as we could, but we just weren't able to do it. So we lost our business and struggled for a long time, not only dealing with the expense of that, but also just trying to find something else to do. And I had grown up in theater, and that was like my thing. So over the course of the next few years, I produced a couple of different shows. I had a one-man Christmas Carol that I used to do, so I did a production of that. I did a production of The Lion in Winter, and neither of them really did well financially because, again, it took some time for people to go back to being alive after September 11th.
Right.
And it was a low point in my life. I was suffering from depression, and I kept getting these mailers, these postcards from the Art Institute. And having grown up being an artist, and I'm by that I mean I learned how to draw before I learned how to talk. And I had been drawing, not just like most kids draw, but I had been like pushing myself ever since I had been a child to learn how to draw better. I taught myself how to read, and one of the first things I was reading was books on Vincent van Gogh and Leonardo da Vinci, and I just wanted to draw. It got to the point where through my entire childhood and adolescence, art for me was not a thing that I ever imagined trying to make a job out of. It was just something I did.
Right.
So when I kept getting all of these mailers and this advertising saying, come get a degree in animation, I'm like, I could probably do that. And my wife encouraged me. It's like I needed to get out of the house. I needed to do something.
Right.
So I contacted the school, and the rest is bleak, overpriced history.
Wow. So I went to school in 2006 to 2011. I think you started after I did.
I think I was about 2 years behind you.
Okay.
And I had about 6 months off. There was about 6 months I took off, and then I came back, and I left about a year. I was gone about a year before the school closed. And, it had already started going downhill considerably. And by that, I mean, they fired the animation staff. They were dropping the animation program, even though there were still so many of us there that were specifically there for degrees in animation. I remember thinking that's kind of strange. You're telling us to stay and keep paying for classes that you technically aren't teaching anymore. And the attitude was, well, you can learn from the people who are working in the game industry, and you can learn from the people who are working in the film industry. And it's like, yeah, but do you have any art teachers that are teaching anything?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was bad.
So did you finish with the degree?
No, because one of the things when I first started going to the school, starting from the beginning, when I went into the recruiting office at AI, Marco was the name of the man who worked there. And he took me on a tour around the campus, and imagine the air quotes that I'm forcing myself not to use right now.
It was basically a business park between two buildings.
Well, the AI was two buildings. It was the one building, and then across the parking lot, where the recruitment office was and the administration's office, and there were a couple of floors that had classrooms in it. But it was mostly just an office building. And then the other building that had other classes in it was also half the culinary school.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual art institute was maybe at the most 10 rooms in an office park that you had classes in.
On rotation.
Well, when I say
Marjan and the other life drawing teacher were the only real space that was.
Yeah, they had the biggest classes for actual art classes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything else was computer. But when I say Marco took me on a tour of the campus, I mean he took me across the street, because we were right next to the Santa Monica airport.
Right.
He took me across the street to where the Bank of America was, and there's all these other office buildings there. And he gestured expansively about this being the campus. There's the campus over there, and there's the campus over there, and there's the campus over there. He was pointing to 24-hour fitness. I didn't know it was that. He was pointing to other office buildings. And then we came back across the street, and we walked by Activision, which was located right across from the culinary school. And he gestured to Activision and talked about how Activision was part of the campus.
No,
campus was the word for the industrial park that the buildings made up. So he kept using the word campus, meaning this is the property in Santa Monica where all these businesses are located. But campus also, of course, means, school.
Right.
So he was implying that all of these buildings were the school, that it was a school that was so popular and so successful, it had an international video game production studio at it. And the funny thing is the very first day of class, after I'd signed up and everything else and came, I remember parking my car on the north side of the Activision building and thinking, well, I'll just cut through the Activision building and go to AI, to the classes. And I went into the lobby of Activision, and there was no way of passing from one side of Activision through the building unless you worked at Activision. And it was then I realized wait a minute. And it less than a couple hours, I realized I had just gotten lied to in a big way. And one of the lies was I made it clear that the only way I was going to be able to go to school is if I got financial aid. And that's the number one thing the Art Institute of California was good at. And that was signing people up for loans because they had their own offshore bank. And if you could not get a loan from any other lending institution, and no lending institution in their right mind would give me a loan, they would give you a loan. They would establish a loan with you. And then, of course, they would turn around and they'd sell your debt to somebody else, to another investment firm. Because that's what Goldman Sachs is an investment firm. And that's who owned the Art Institute, was Goldman Sachs. And I got 3 loans from the Art Institute until the Obama administration kind of put a clamp down on these predatory loan practices that were targeting people like me and others like me who thought they were bettering their lives. But all we were doing was volunteering to become cash centers for various investment firms.
Right.
And so by the time I had gotten 3 loans, the last one I had maybe 6 more months of classes to take. And they were all liberal studies classes. They were all the classes that had literally nothing to do with art, let alone animation.
Right.
And I remember Mike Libanati, who used to be in charge of the animation department, he actually got me out of some of those classes because, I was old. I had already been to other schools. I already had experience in doing other things. And so he was able to communicate to the president of the school at that time that I shouldn't really be forced to take classes so I tested out of them, basically.
We're talking like geometry, basic history classes, like... Yeah, it's basically like the first
psychology
year or
classes,
two.
the sociology classes, the things that are like, well, if I wanted to improve my understanding of the world and my education, sure. But you're charging me too much for these things.
It was like $1,000, $4,000 per class.
Something like that.
Something ridiculous. It was like $400. We had 11. No, it had to have been 4,000 because I remember distinctly. We had 11 weeks per quarter because we were on a quarter system. So we went to school year round, and so you had 11 weeks per quarter, and every class was $400 roughly. So every time you would miss a class, and you could only miss 2. If you missed more than 2, you automatically failed out of the class, and you were billed for it. So you were definitely on the hook for thousands. Like it was like $4,000 per class. It was like $400 per like session.
And keep in mind, this was a quote unquote art school. And the big difference between the Art Institute and any other school, say we were to go to Cal Arts, which is a very good school. If you were to go to Cal Arts and say, I want to go to Cal Arts, they'd say, well, show us your portfolio.
Right.
Because we need to know where you're at. It's a very delicate subject. I met a lot of young people at AI who said, I'm an artist and I want to get paid to be an artist. And what they meant was they drew with number 2 pencils on lined notebook paper in high school all of their favorite anime characters.
Yeah. We had a lot of people that were in our program that should not. We had a lot of people that did not know how to draw.
Good for you for trying, but you're not going to get hired. Anybody would hire you. It's just not going to happen. But that's what school's for, right? You go to school so you can learn how to do a thing that you want to do. And AI was a technical school. It was a trade school. To call it an art school suggests that it's the place that you go to learn how to make art. No, it's the place to learn how to use art in an industry.
Right.
And so
not very well.
Yeah, there were a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of people who signed up for a lot of student loans to take classes they were not prepared for.
Right.
I remember being Marjan Hormozi, who was the life drawing teacher that we mentioned earlier. Brilliant artist, and I was her teaching assistant.
Both of us were.
Yeah. And there would be students in her class sometimes that you'd see them sitting in front of their easel with their pencil, and they're going,
what do I do?
And they would just become more and more disenchanted and sad because they literally did not know how to draw, meaning how to take a pencil and put it on a surface and make a line that meant something.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and that's fine. Everybody starts off someplace, but you don't pay that much money to start off at that level.
Right. People were incredibly unprepared. And there were people that, this wasn't unique to the animation class, but there were people that were at our school that I would say were mentally maybe not in the best place to be taking classes. I remember there was one gentleman who was in the tech lab, and it was very clear that he had a psychological situation in which he got frustrated very easily and he would hit himself in the head. I think a lot of people had
you're talking about me.
Him.
No.
Wasn't you? It wasn't me either. But he was very clearly very frustrated, and this was a normal behavior for him. My suspicion to do armchair psychology was that this individual might have been autistic, or there was some sort of behavioral tic that was happening that caused him to act out that way physically.
Right.
And
well, you got to remember.
I remember thinking, gosh, like, is this person in a place where they're able to take classes and to be able to be successful in their field? And I remember being a TA and being like, you are not good enough to be in this class, or, being in my like senior classes and looking at people's work going, how are you going to graduate with me? Like, you are not, like, I'm sorry. And I know I was the bad guy on our campus because people thought I was really mean and cruel, but I was like, you guys suck. Like, how are these people graduating? Like, why are you still here? You were obviously not good enough. You've obviously not learned anything, and yet you're still here. Like, why hasn't anyone sat you down and gone, why are you spending so much money to be here? And
that's your answer to your question. I knew students who had literally failed to graduate. They didn't fail out of the class, because when you fail out of a class, that's it. You're gone. I mean, in high school, you flunk out of high school, you're out.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to come back as often as you want, because it's public school and you get to have a degree if you want.
Right.
If you decide, well, I've taken the 12th grade 3 times now, I'm done, I'm just going to drop out. But if you're paying, close to $5,000 every 3 months for classes, and at the end of those 3 months, you fail to pass that class, and you're told you got to come back to the next quarter and do it again for another $5,000, and then you fail again. Legally, you're only able to do that so many times where you have to say, sorry, we can't keep charging you for this. Yeah. But they did it. They kept charging. But that was the premise. I remember, because I had been a professional artist for many, many years, and I had an instructor. Do you remember Peter Gend? He looked at my portfolio one day, and he just went, why are you here? Because I already had a professional quality portfolio.
Right.
And my answer was, I have thousands of pieces of paper that show that I can do the work. I need one piece of paper that tells people that I should get paid to do the work, because people want degrees. And that's unfortunate, because the way the industry's set up, artists don't hire artists. Human resource departments hire artists.
Right.
And they're not concerned with whether or not you can do the job. They want to know whether or not you're a risk, whether or not you're somebody who can work for the company. Human resource departments are there to protect the company, not to give people opportunity to do what they wanted to do. That's why networking was important. Because if you network, you meet the artists, you meet the directors, you meet the producers who work in studios, and you build up relationships with them. And then sometimes you can kind of circumnavigate around the process. And I've worked in 3 stop motion animation studios by just basically saying hey to people. And networking is very important. Obviously, being able to do the work is very important too.
Right.
Neither networking nor the importance of being good were anything that was ever stressed at the beginning of the process of going to the Art Institute. Their top priority was, can you pay us money?
Do you have a parent with credit who could also pay us money?
And the way they would recruit, they would go to high schools and they would sell the school to high school students, to teenagers who were at a point in their life where they realized the clock's ticking. I'm not going to be a kid for very much longer. I'm going to be expected to do something. And I don't want to work in a factory. I don't want to work at a gas station. I don't want to work in a bookstore. I want to do this thing. And usually that thing was, and if you look at the business model for the Art Institute, all of the subjects they focused on, animation, culinary, video game, film, there were reality TV shows on television for each of those things. People who worked in this industry or that industry, and it was reality TV. The culinary school especially really functioned as by telling teenagers, did you see that one school? Do you see how that one show about one reality TV show and how popular they are all? You can work in the culinary industry as well. And it's like,
right.
Do you want to be a chef? Do you want to be somebody who cooks food for a living? Then go to a culinary school for that reason, not because you think it's going to make you famous.
Right.
And that's when they started the fashion school at AI. It was based on the same premise. You had all these reality TV shows based on fashion contests. And the truth is, in fashion design, most fashion designers aren't really very good artists. It has nothing to do with being able to draw. And you had people coming to the fashion school and they were taking art classes when ultimately that wasn't going to matter. But that was part of the predatory system by which they recruited people. And like with myself, where they lied about what the campus was and they told me, sure, we'll get you a loan. Sure. It's because they needed people to pay. That's the only reason. They would take, the way Peter Gann put it to me once, is they'll take any expletive deleted who can pay.
Anybody. Any body.
They'll take anybody who will come, who will be able to pay. And I love Peter, but I think he was kind of frustrated with the school that he was working for.
Yeah. And Peter,
taking advantage of people who shouldn't be there. We both, like you mentioned earlier, we both met students who, wherever their heart was at, their butts were in the wrong place. They were not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And I felt bad because, I had been a teacher myself before. And so like when I was assisting Marjan, I'd try to take the time and help. One of the hardest things about learning is learning how to learn, how to listen, how to take notes, how to ignore some of the things that are being said and get to the meaning of what was being said.
Right.
I had one of Marjan's students, he's literally just sitting there in front of the easel. He hasn't made one line. And he called me over and he asked me, and he said, Chad, how do you overcome the fear of screwing up? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I want to start drawing, but I'm sure I'm going to screw it up. So I took his pencil out of his hand and I reached up to the easel and I just drew a line across the easel. And I said, there, it's screwed up. Now you can draw.
Yeah.
You're
and
not,
Marjan's class, that woman, I love Marjan. She just recently went abroad to see her mother. And I just remember looking at photos and Facebook and being like, I miss this woman. Yeah. Marjan was tough. You could not get an A in her class was what I was. I got A's, which is also why I was a TA. But most people got C's. Many people did not pass. And
Marjan, if you were lucky, you passed.
Marjan would throw you out if you had the wrong paper, if you had the wrong pencil, if you had the wrong eraser. She's like, I don't want to see mechanical pencils. I don't want to see hairy lines. I don't want to see your cell phones. And as TAs, we upheld the rule of Marjan, which was, this is a serious class. And this is she taught at Otis. She taught at FIDM.
She
and she
still
taught
does
at
teach at Otis. Yeah, if anybody were to ask me an opinion about where to go to school, I'd say, if you can't go to Cal Arts, go to Otis.
Exactly. And those are real schools.
Yeah.
And you would learn under, and it's funny because I ended up working at BLT doing movie posters. Mm-hmm. I ran into somebody who took classes and also TA'd for Marjan because I was looking at his work and I'm like, there's a very specific way that students of Marjan will draw that is unique. And anybody that works in this industry in Los Angeles that either went to Otis, FIDM, or Cal Arts, or the AI, and learned and taught and were taught by her, learned under this woman, we all draw the same way. We all have very unique ways that we do our proportions, have you noticed the way we hold our pencils like Marjan?
Angle sighting.
And so it's the angle sighting, right?
Mhm.
And so it was just it's amazing that the impact that this woman has had in our industry, and she's like a silent, like I remember when The Incredibles came out, we all thought it was Marjan.
Mhm.
Edna Mode was Marjan, and I think silently a little bit of Marjan is an
She's
Edna
in
Mode.
denial over it, but I'm telling you,
I'm pretty sure
Brad Bird, that was, yeah.
that was
He remembered
definitely her.
Marjan and said this.
But Marjan, it was Marjan, it was Kosis, it was Marx. There was
Douglas
again Kirk
and Vladimir Zimakov.
Zimakov, who I
Marjan,
didn't
Douglas, and
have,
Vladimir were probably the biggest
and Rogers.
on me.
And Rogers, like all of those teachers, they had worked in the industry. They all influenced the way that we worked, and we had people that were high caliber, incredible professionals, people that had worked on The Road to El Dorado, people that had worked on Beauty and the Beast, people that had worked. Mike Rogers designed the Rugrats. Like we were working and learning under some of the best people in our industry, but our school fundamentally did not prepare us to work in our
school was
industry.
perfect, but the Art Institute was their top priority was making money.
Absolutely.
And when they had a choice between doing it the right way and doing it the way that made them money, they chose the way to do it to make them money. So as a result, they had a lot more people there who, not to sound like a snob, but they had a lot of students there that didn't belong there, not in that type of educational environment. If they had gone to community colleges, if they had taken art classes, basic art, fundamental art classes, they would have done a lot better. They would have had a lot more opportunity. And there was no portfolio review on coming into the school. And I remember challenging the recruiting office on that, saying, why are you doing this to these kids? Why are you lying to these kids and telling them that they can be professional artists in a cutthroat industry, which most people don't think of cartoons as a cutthroat industry. And it is.
Oh God, it is.
The Big D, as some of us call it, is one of the harshest, cruelest, most cutthroat studios in the world. And it's not just because of their corporate entity or the money or all that. It's the standard that they hold.
Yeah.
Because they have a legacy of quality that they have to live up to. Even when they make something that sucks, it's still something that's 10 times better than the things that are out there. So most schools, I remember going to CalArts back in the early 90s to see whether or not I could go there, and meeting Corny Cole, who was one of the biggest
heard a lot about him
there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful man. I had no idea who he was. And he took the time to take me on a tour of the school and show me the different classes, show me what they were doing, show me some of the experimental films that they were working on there. And it wasn't until years later, in fact, it wasn't until after I met Marjan, that I realized who this man was and how overjoyed I felt that he had taken the time. And this was shortly before his death, that I realized how nice it was that this man had taken the time to show me around. And at CalArts, you have to show your portfolio before you can get in. I mean, they will look at your work and go, study some more, practice some more, and then turn in your portfolio next year, and let's see. Whereas at AI, the fourth quarter review, when the fourth quarter review came up, they give you a list saying we need to see these many pieces in your portfolio. And I remember the day that it came, I had like 3 times the amount of stuff in my portfolio as the minimum said I should have in there.
And it was
because
easy.
I had a bunch of stuff.
It was easy to do that, to just even hit the bare minimum, let alone 3 times. That was like. No,
the day of fourth quarter review, half of the students in the room waiting for their turn to go in to talk to Mike Libanati, Peter, Mark from Game. I'm forgetting his last name.
Oh my God. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, my ability to hold on to names is slipping over my brain.
Mark Peters. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyway, and Douglas Kirk. And so I'm waiting for my turn, and half the students in there, they didn't not only have the minimum number of pieces in their portfolio, they didn't have anything. People showed up to fourth quarter review, portfolio review, with no portfolio, and had an attitude of, what does it matter? And they wondered whether or not they were ever going to get hired. And it's like,
Yeah. And this is a year into the program. So for context, I believe when I started, our tuition for 4 years was like 100,000 or something. So you're 25,000 in the hole. That is a UC school for 4 years. You've basically spent the equivalent of like going to like UCLA or any Cal State. And you had students show up to fourth quarter review 1 year in and have nothing. And yet people like us were prepared because we took it seriously. And so there was this huge disparity even between people that were there just to pass the time and the people that were there because we couldn't go to any other school or we were just hoodwinked, thinking that this was a real school.
Yeah. There were some real teachers, obviously, like we said. There were people who treated it professionally, and whatever their motivations were for taking a job there, it's the same reason people have motivation, are motivated to take a job anywhere.
Yeah.
But that school didn't deserve them. There were a couple instructors there and several other departments and a couple of animation who were as bad as the students, as far as I'm concerned. They didn't belong there either. They treated students like garbage. They had issues. But that happens everywhere you go. There are some very good artists who make very lousy teachers. It's not a given that just because you're good at something means you're good at teaching other people how to do it.
It's true.
There are some teachers who are not only very good teachers, they're remarkable artists, but they work in a field that the industry is not accommodating.
Right.
I remember Douglas told me on my portfolio review that I had an uphill climb ahead of me getting hired at studios because not only was I older than most of the people who ran the studios, I was better than they were, and that nobody wants to hire somebody who might take their job. And he ended up being right. I as an actor, I never went to an audition that I didn't get the part because I never auditioned for a role I would not have given myself if I had been the director. So I always gauged what I could do based on a good understanding of what I could do. Mm-hmm. I've talked to people in studios who assumed I was the boss when I walked in. They assumed I was the producer, or they assumed I was the director. And as soon as they found out I was there for a job, they seemed so relieved that they could tell me to go away because I intimidated them. I mean, the way I look mostly. And that's tough because in my head, I'm just a 5-year-old kid. In my head, I'm just a tiny guy who loves to draw. And it's a shame when all I want is an opportunity to just be a part of something good, but other people feel threatened because they think I'm there for their job, and I'm not there for your job. I don't want your job. I want my job.
What is your job right now? Because you said you're working from home.
I am an author and an illustrator. I have 2 books out. The Big Book of Monsters, Volume 1, and which is a visual encyclopedia of myths, legends, and legendary creatures from around the world. And a second book, The Night Parade, which is about Japanese mythology and an event that takes place once a year according to Japanese mythology, where yokai, which are Japanese demons and goblins, go on this little parade. And both of those books are available on Amazon.com. And I had
no idea. You were so cool.
Nah. I'm also working on Volume 2, which I know a lot of people are pissed at waiting for Volume 2, but hey. It took me 2 years to do the first one, and that was with a broken back. And then I also am working on, I counted it up last night, 28 other books, including a novel. And so that's what I do. That, and I spend a lot of time saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm busy.
What a blessing to be able to do that, though, to say, I can't, to have the luxury of turning people away.
I would much rather work myself to death than tell people no. That makes me an awful pushover, I know, but I've had to learn how to say no.
You have to.
I'm such a slut.
So would you say you are working in a field that is adjacent to what we learned, but would you say that going to AI helped you in any way, just in a professional capacity?
Well, hindsight's 2020. People who can look out of their butt amaze me, but hindsight is 2020. it's easy to say if I had to do it over again, I would do it differently. There are very few things in life in which you wouldn't say that. If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't go to AI at all. I would regret. I wouldn't know because hey, it wouldn't have happened. But the best things I took away from AI were what I learned from and my experience with people like Marjan Hormozi, Douglas Kirk, Vladimir Zimikov, Mike Libanati, Peter Gend, and students that I met like you. My friend Emily, my friend Ketsi, my friend Margaret. These are relationships that have meant a lot to me. And even people like Mario and Joel Carrillo, I put up with them too. There was a lot of positive things I took away from it, but it should have been a lot better. It should have and could have been a lot better. Which sounds like just whining if you think about it. It just sounds like whining. Well, things are tough. Some people have bad experience. Some people will go to the Sorbonne in France and have a bad time. Think about the great opportunity you had, though, to learn those people. It's like, I'm not talking about it being perfect. Nothing is perfect. But the predatory nature of what the Art Institute did in fishing for the gullible, of hunting for kids who were looking for either a pipe dream or a real world chance.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's why regulations happen. That's why it's tough to open a school. And that's why the Art Institute was not a nonprofit organization. If you're going to a school and it is not a nonprofit organization, that's a warning sign. Just because a school is nonprofit doesn't mean it doesn't make a profit. The president of USC rides in a limousine to work every day. They make a lot. The highest paid executive in the United States is the president of the Red Cross, which is a nonprofit organization. Nonprofit does not mean no profit. It just means at the end of the year, after they've paid all their bills, including their employees' salaries, all the money that's left over must go back into the company and be spent. It doesn't go in anybody's bank account.
Right.
The Art Institute purposefully avoided being a nonprofit organization because Goldman Sachs needed the money. And by needed, I mean wanted. Their business practices were based on picking your pocket, on getting everything they possibly can. And my thing is this. Everybody wants to brag about capitalism being so great. There is no part of capitalism that says you must treat people like crap in order to make money off of them.
Right.
There are people who gladly put themselves in debt in exchange for a great education that leads to opportunity. It would be great if you weren't in debt, sure, but that's an entirely different issue. The student loan industry in the United States has successfully lobbied to change what it means to get a student loan. Not a loan so that you can have an opportunity to get an education, but a loan so you can have an opportunity to be continuously in debt for all the rest of your life as your debt is divvied up and sold to different investment firms. And the Art Institute was very much a part of that problem. 10 years ago, it was a huge problem. It wasn't just them. It was a lot of predatory diploma mill-like schools.
Yeah, ITT Tech, DeVry, Corinthian.
And they're gone.
And they're gone for a reason. Yeah.
The irony about that is about a year before they closed, do you remember, I don't know if this happened before you left or not, they did this thing in every classroom and every hallway where they repainted the walls and they put logos on the walls and slogans on the walls, and they came up with this new logo for the Art Institute that were these 4 different circular icons. One of them was a mannequin, a fashion dummy. One of them was a spatula. One of them was a movie camera, and I think one was a game controller. I could be remembering that differently. But I remember them doing all that, and people were like, "Oh, look at that new logo." And I'm looking at this going, "How come there's nothing for the animation department?"
Yeah.
There's no logo for animation. And within weeks after they came out with that, they fired the animation department. And it occurred to me, oh my God, they planned this a long time ago. They literally readjusted their marketing and their pamphlets to reflect where they were going. And they did it right
And
in front
didn't
of
tell
us.
anybody.
Yeah. And so when they got rid of all the animation people, it was not just only offensive, it was just terrible. These people that we loved and worked with and learned from, and they were just booted out. But also, it was very insidious because it implied they were doing something else. And so one of the last things I did in school, Missy, who was another student, Missy Muncie and
I remember Missy Muncie.
we went to the guy who had taken over Mike Libinotti's job.
Yeah.
He was the head of the film department. And we went to talk to him about how much this sucked, that it was kind of contradictory to what the school was offering us when we signed up, which were degrees in animation. And now the department was gone. And his attitude was, well, you can still learn these things from the game department or the film department. It doesn't really matter. And I said, I'm sorry. Yeah. I said, it gives me the impression that this school's not going to last long doing this. Obviously, this school just wants to be a cooking school and a fashion school. And I said, if you keep this up, I wouldn't be surprised if this school is closed within a year. And he was like, well, that's really surprising that you would say something like that. Here's the deal. Why don't you come back in a year and we'll talk about it? And I remember thinking, well, first of all, if I'm right, that won't matter. I won't come back and you won't be here. Well, guess what? They were gone within a year. And it was not long after my friend Emily had graduated that they closed their doors. And literally, if you were a former student of the Art Institute and you wanted to get any documentation that you had been there, if you wanted to get your grades or anything, there was no place to go.
You could email somebody in Pennsylvania or something, or Philadelphia.
No, across the street from the actual buildings, next to the 24-hour fitness, there was a small office that they rented where they literally stacked all the boxes with all the paperwork and all the files of all the students. And they stacked it up there. But you needed to actually find somebody who had a key and would let you in for you to rifle through the boxes and find your stuff. It was so crappy. If you saw this in a movie, you'd think, well, this is fake.
The company I work for right now is called CoreLogic. And it is the most aggressive, most invasive background check I've ever done in my life. Because we do government contracts. This is a very, very serious, very well-respected company. I have a diploma, right? But I don't have a transcript. I can show you photos, and this is what it came to. They couldn't verify my degree. They couldn't verify 5 years of my life at this school because there's nobody to call. And I remember I was like, I've worked at Disney, I've worked at Scopely, I've worked at BuzzFeed. I have no reason to lie to you. I could show you photos of my graduation. I could put you in touch with the head of my department. I can give you his phone number. I have no way because they're like, well, we need a transcript. And it was this big mark on my background check. And I was like, I promise you, if there was anybody that I knew that you could call, aside from basically a former faculty that don't even work there anymore, there is no way to prove that I went to this school, that I actually graduated. And I'm sitting here with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, yet you can't do a proper background check to prove that I went there.
Right. That's why when people ask me sometimes, oh, do you have a degree? I feel like saying, sure, I have a degree in animation, just as much as anybody else who went to that school has a degree in animation.
So did the school get shuttered while you were still getting your degree?
About I'd say about 6 months to a year before they closed, I couldn't get any more student loans from them because the Obama administration had shut down the predatory loan practices that AI indulged in. And so they couldn't give me another loan. And of course, the response to that when I was like, but that sucks because I told you I could not come to your school unless I got financial aid. And they said, well, blame Obama. And it's like, I'm not going to blame Obama. I'm blaming Obama. I'm blaming you. And so I had to take 6 months off. And the idea was I was going to raise enough money so that I could then pay for the last 4 or 5 classes that I needed that were all liberal studies classes that had literally nothing to do with the degree. in the department that had been shut down, it was just it wasn't just that it was a clown car, it was a clown car full of dead clowns. It was just it was not fun. And for an art school, I know there are going to be a lot of people who will hear this and think, that's just an art school. I mean, come on. And it's like, well, if you're an artist, going to art school is very important. But you're right.
It's like med school. You have to go to art school.
Art school is difficult in its own ways. But that art school was difficult in ways that it should not have been.
Right.
And the thing is, it wasn't just an art school. It was a culinary school, a fashion school, a film school, and a game design school. And I could only imagine that all of those people went through the same problems. You know, the culinary school was making people feel like they were going to get jobs as top chefs at the biggest restaurant chains in the world. And it's like, no, once you get your degree at this culinary school, you're going to have to go and apply to be a fry cook at Denny's, just like anybody else in that industry. That's how the industry is designed.
Yeah.
I remember earlier we were talking about you encountered a student that clearly did not have the capacity to understand what was going on and should not have been there. I remember I was in an observational drawing class in my first quarter with Mr. Vu. And
I remember Vu.
There was a young kid, couldn't have been no more than 18, 19 at the most. And he refused to draw. He refused to draw the shoe. He refused to draw the thing, whatever it was. And it wasn't just I don't know how to draw. One student I remember raised her hand in the middle of the class and said, Mr. Vu, how do you draw? Because Vu was operating under the understanding that everybody in his classroom already knew how to draw. They were here to learn how to draw observationally. But most of the students in the class did not know how to hold a pencil and actually look at something and then draw it on a piece of paper. They didn't understand line weight. They didn't understand dimension. How do you pick a three-dimensional thing and draw a two-dimensional drawing and make it look like a three-dimensional thing? This kid, he did not want to draw at all. And when Vu challenged him on that, why do you not want to draw? Why are you here if you don't want to draw? And he says, well, because I want to work in the game industry, and I don't know why I would need to draw. And people were like, have you ever played a video game before that involves art? And that art has to be created by people. He's like, well, I don't want to be an artist in the game industry. I have ideas for games, and I want to give ideas. I want to produce games. And my response was, listen, why would any game studio want to hire somebody for their ideas when ideas are worth like a penny? When you're saying you aren't willing to do the hard work, which is the creation of something, coming up with an idea, give me 5 seconds, I'll come up with an idea. I mean, have you seen movies? Some ideas literally are written out on cocktail napkins and then turned into screenplays. Ideas are easy. I have a book about the stories that we've been telling for thousands of years to one another. There are no new stories out there. It's how you tell the story. And the way artists tell stories is with art. And this kid had this attitude of, but I'm just going to get paid to sit in an office and tell people what to do. And everybody was like, no, you're not. You are never going to have that job. But that young man had been encouraged by the recruiting department at AI to sign up for really expensive classes, knowing that was his attitude. And
unbelievable.
He should never have gotten that far. I would, sure, everybody should be allowed to pursue their dream, but they shouldn't have their pockets regularly picked while they do it.
Right.
And you need to be honest with some people. I don't know how to play the violin. I may want to play the violin, but if I pick up a violin and start scratching at it with a bow, I'm not going to blame anybody who says, dude, you don't know how to play a violin. It's like, no, I don't, but I'm going to do it anyway. Not professionally, I'm not. It is what it is. It's an unfortunate time in a lot of people's lives that the school doesn't care. They're gone.
No.
But those of us who are left with this huge boat anchor around our necks,
for life,
for loans for money you need to pay to somebody who never gave you the loan to begin with. They just bought your debt from somebody else, and they probably didn't buy your entire debt. Your debt was probably divvied up into 6 pieces and sold to 6 different groups.
Right.
And Adam Conover in Adam Ruins Everything has an episode where he talks about student loans, and he talks about how predatory the industry is, the lobbying that they've done to be able to get away with what they do, and the level of, for lack of a better word, ignorance that they rely on when people, especially young people, when they volunteer to get involved in this. That industry relies on you not knowing any better.
Absolutely.
And there's no regulation that says you have to be honest with them. You have to tell them exactly what's going on. Nope. Hooray for capitalism.
And you're also in a point in your life. I covered this in my first episode. I was 18. I was coming from an abusive situation at home. I was desperate to get out, and at any cost, anybody that would put a hand out and give me the opportunity to go to school. And we're not going to get into all of that, but at 18, what credit do you have? You don't have any sort of financial anything, and they're putting these loans that you're on the hook for eternity, practically. Yeah. And they're saying, don't worry, you're going to make so much money.
Oh, yeah, within weeks after graduating, you're going to be working for a studio and making twice this amount of money. It's like, no, you're not. Did they tell you?
I mean, I was. And I was one of thousands of people that went to Disney, and I was making $16 an hour, and I was like, oh my God, you guys have made it. I'm making $16 an hour as an intern. What? And I was paying $900 in this horrible studio apartment, and I was paying $1,200 in student loans, like fresh out of college. And like, I'm one of very, 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 very few people that have the luxury to say I make a ridiculous amount of money, but I don't get to enjoy any of it. I don't get to, I have $1,000 in savings and that's it. I can't imagine what it's like for people that did not walk in my shoes, and yet I am crumbling. I mean, how much do you know? I'm assuming you still have a bunch of loans. How much debt do you have right now?
Enough. Enough.
Do you even know the number?
That is always on your mind. You always think. And I'm at an age now where I'm closer to the reality of being old than you are. But it happens to, if you're lucky, it happens to everybody. But I still have debt. I'm every once in a while, I'll hear about somebody saying, I don't off the top of my head. I'll hear people say, hey, I finally paid off my student loan. I'm like, you lucky son of a bitch. Because
how?
Barack Obama was president for 2 years before he finally paid off his student loans.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. The way the industry is set up, that particular industry, the student loan industry is set up so that you never get done paying them. You are a cash center as far as they're concerned. That's why people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have been struggling so hard to change that industry. The obviously the most positive extreme end of that is loan forgiveness, debt forgiveness, and that would be fantastic. But at the same time, I hear people say, well, that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem fair that other taxpayers have to cover the expense of your bad decision. And it's like,
right.
I'm not in debt because I made a bad decision. I'm in debt because I made a decision somebody else decided to exploit. Yeah. And work the system so that, because, for example, the interest rate for the loan that I originally got was nothing compared to the interest rate that was added to it when my debt got sold to somebody else. The agreement I signed for the student loan I received to pay for my classes, that was a separate agreement. Once your debt is sold to somebody else, that's not the agreement that you made with them. You made no agreement with them. They bought your debt. And according to the law, since they owe your debt, they can ask for it whenever they want. They can call your entire loan in right now. Just do it. And because...
What happened to your interest rates? You said that it went from one...
Oh, it was doubled at least. By the third time my loan was sold, I had two different loans. One of them was sold at least 3 times. Because I kept getting mail saying, okay, now it belongs to this person. Now it belongs to this person. And it's wearying after a while when you're thinking, well, it's like slavery. When will I ever be free of this? When will I ever be free of this price tag that's hanging off me? And, am I ever going to be able to buy a house? Am I ever going to be able to buy another car? Am I ever going to be able to retire? And I can only imagine for a young person who they go from high school to this kind of school that is based on predatory loans, and almost immediately they're just strapped with this debt that as soon as they graduate from that school, regardless of the quality of their work and the likelihood of them getting a job. I mean, as you said, you went right to Disney, and you're a great artist, and you have the same millstone hanging around your neck that the person who graduated at the bottom of their class and can barely hold a pencil and can't get a job. Same debt. And so it's not just you and I, people who are competent artists, whining about the way the system is not being fair to us. No, it's you and I, two competent artists, whining about how crappy the system is. Not just to us, but to so many other people. I mean, I'm okay. I'm going to get by. I'm not living on the street. You've survived a lot, and you're very good at what you do. And there's probably stuff you haven't even thought about doing that if you did it, you would just excel at it. But I'm not just, this isn't just about me. This is about, I knew people who I remember in school and were very enthusiastic and happy about the idea of being an artist, a professional artist, working in animation. And they're not. They're not doing that. They've had to find something else to do. They've had
a lot of them work in restaurants. Had to find
some other job. Yeah. And they don't draw anymore. They've
many
had to
of them are at movie theaters.
Yeah, they've had to give not up only their dreams, they've had to give up the thing they love. And it's because the debt has told them you have to give it up. And it's not just you and I and people who went to this one really bad chain of diploma mills. There's a lot of them. And enough time has passed now that they've shuttered their doors and closed up and filed for bankruptcy that you're starting to see new schools appear. New schools are starting to show up. And it's the exact same type of commercials, the exact same type of aggressive marketing online, the mailers they send out. It's just the same. It's just the same bandit. They've just shaved their handlebar mustache and are wearing a white hat now. And it's the same thing. It's a predatory loan industry calling itself a school, set up in a strip mall somewhere or some industrial complex and saying, come here and get in debt and yay.
Yeah. Get a degree.
Yeah. Especially nowadays. I remember, again, nothing makes you sound old like saying, I remember when, but I remember when,
right?
I remember when the internet first came out, people referred to it as the information superhighway. But for something that is touted as the information superhighway, it seems to be instilling more ignorance than ever before. The fact of the matter is, online, right now, you can learn everything you can learn in an art school. You can learn how to draw observationally, you can draw still lives, you can draw a lot. If you have a hard time finding nudes online, you're not doing it right. You can learn how to draw anything. You can learn how to draw using a pencil, a pen, a piece of crap, a stick, anything. Just on YouTube, there's universities worth of information that don't cost anything, let alone $100,000 in debt.
Yeah.
As the experience of going to school should be the experience of learning face to face with somebody who has been doing what they've been doing for decades and are masters at it. And I did get a couple of those people in my life, and I'm glad of that. Opportunity and education should not come at the expense of a lifetime of debt. So anybody who's upset that people like you or I are saying that this predatory industry needs to be thwarted, and those of us who got sucked into a lifetime of debt dishonestly, it would be nice if we could be let off the hook for this.
Yeah.
People who are complaining about that, they haven't been in our shoes, or they grew up at a time where they had to go through it as well, and they're thinking, well, I survived it. And it's like, well, just because somebody survived horrible abuse doesn't mean everybody should have to go through that horrible abuse. because at least there will be people cheering you on to survive. It's like, no,
Right.
if you can prevent it from happening to somebody else, prevent it from happening to somebody else. I don't want to look at myself as a victim. I don't believe I was victimized. I think I made dumb decisions, but I was in a place in my life where any decision was helpful. And there are industries that take advantage of that. They target people who are in the kind of position that I was in and the kind of position you were in. I don't have the benefit of saying, well, I was just a kid. It's like, well, I kind of was, but I was a 45-year-old kid. Right. I was somebody who just needed something new in my life. And I stepped in a bear trap.
Took advantage.
Yeah.
In the spirit of, to wrap it all up, everyone always asks, like, if you could have done it differently, what would you have done? Or knowing what you know now, what would you have done now? What would you say to a me or a you today, right now, post-pandemic, seeing these flyers coming into the mail, knowing that, there's classes online? What would you do? Because you still need a diploma, right? You still need the paper. You also need education.
Do you, though?
I would argue you do because
who is the number one person saying you need to have a diploma if you want to work here?
HR.
Yeah. So
unfortunately,
let's look at HR departments. Let's start examining how HR departments work and why this person sitting in this department who could not do the job required by the company if they worked in another department is the gatekeeper telling you that you're not going to work here unless you have a diploma. That's something that's very seldom, if ever, brought up because it's just assumed. It's just assumed. Well, you need to have a diploma. You can't get a job without a diploma. And it's like, it's just a piece of paper. It's not the actual job. If you go to a school that has a student body of 2,000 people, which means come graduation, if everybody passes the class, 2,000 people are graduating on that day. The valedictorian, the number one student, the person with the best grade point average graduating that day, is getting the exact same piece of paper that the person who graduated just barely passing with the worst grades possible, but they did graduate. They're getting the exact same piece of paper, a diploma. So that means an HR person will look at that person who is borderline incompetent and give them the same job as the valedictorian. Not based on whether they actually are competent, but because they have a piece of paper. A good HR person sees beyond that job description and says, well, what kind of person are you? Because you can be a really smart, highly educated, top of your class person and a complete jerk who's incompetent when it comes to the actual job. Or you could be somebody who graduated at the bottom of your class because of some disability or some kind of hurdle that you had to overcome. You were raising kids, you were me, and yet you graduated, and it shouldn't be held against you that you were at the bottom of the class. The diploma looks like it's an equalizer, but if it's just the bland statement of you need to have a diploma to be able to get a job here, that's not good enough. There are people who can't get work who deserve that work. And if there isn't a standard by which a human resources department could actually look at them and go, well, let's give you a test. Let's see whether or not you can do it. Some studios will actually test in artists. They'll say, draw this.
Many of them do.
On this. They have internships, which I don't encourage, really. Internships are good. Unpaid internships,
RBS. That's the best way to put it.
because that's basically slave labor. And I was in an I was in an unpaid internship when I hurt my back, which led to 8 years of agonizing pain and 2 back surgeries. I didn't get anything out of that except a lot of misery.
Right.
I met a couple of people through that job that I really value the relationships I have with them now, but I don't think I would have lived up with almost a decade of agonizing pain. I would have traded that off if I had the opportunity. So looking back, what would I have done differently? I would have gone to Cal Arts. I would have gone to, in other words, if you're getting mailers in the mail, postcards and flyers for a school you've never heard of, see what other schools exist. If you say, I want to do this, if you're a young person, why are you listening to this old guy talk, first of all? If you're a young person and you're right on the edge of your life and you're questioning whether or not you want to go to college,
ask yourself why. That might be the first
what
question.
Is it you want to do? Because you may want to do something that you don't need a degree.
Yeah.
You may want to do something that you could do right now. Ralph Bakshi was the director of Wizards and American Pop, and don't look this up, kids, but Fritz the Cat. He once very aggressively answered a question at a convention once where he basically yelled at all of us, you, me, all of us, and said, why are you worried about whether or not a studio is going to give you a job? If you want to make an animated film, make an animated film. On your computer right now, you have, if not half of the technology necessary to make an animated film, you probably have all of it. If you've got Photoshop, you have the technology needed to make an animated film. And if you don't want to pay for Photoshop, which I don't blame you, there are free alternatives to Photoshop. But the internet and computers today, your phone, for crying out loud, there are people who have phones that have the technology in which they can make a television series, which you can make a movie. If you have a creative bent about yourself and you want to write, direct, draw, film, whatever, just do it. I can understand wanting to go getting an education in something because education edifies your mind and it makes you smarter. I have books. I mean, books are a thing. And even then, the internet has books on it that you don't even need to have a physical book, even though I can never imagine giving up physical books. So I would say if you have an opportunity and you're questioning whether or not you should go to school, if it was about a question of just going to school, yeah, go to school. If it was a question of putting yourself $100,000 in debt to go to school, why would you do that to yourself?
Right.
There's no, and I don't care who's telling you otherwise. I don't care if it's your parents. I don't care if it's Mr. Wilson, the neighbor from Home Improvement. I don't care who is. I don't care if God Himself comes down on a rainbow, His glorious hair whipping in the wind, and telling you go to school. You look at Him and say, "Well, give me the money, and I'll go."
Yeah.
Because you don't owe it to anybody to put yourself in a lifetime of debt. But if you're going to go, pick a good school. I mean, scour the internet for references, for testimonials, people talking about it, and find cranks like us who are bitching and complaining about the bad experiences we've had. Because, I mean, some people complain because they suck. Other people complain because something else sucks. You know? And learn the difference. And above all, never give up your critical thinking. Never give up critical thinking. I don't care who they are. I don't care how positive they sound. The best looking cults are still cults. The people who tell you not to worry about it, not to think about it, not complain about it, are trying to sell you something. And that paycheck, that price tag may be a lot more than you can afford. And so go to CalArts.
Thank you for that.
Go to art school.
Go to CalArts. That's the moral. Or a state school. Like, just make the decision fortified with knowledge, information, time that you've invested, and do the research.
And ultimately,
we did it.
Ultimately, when you're in a classroom with a teacher, remember, going to school is one thing, but the teachers that you find, there are some people out there who are absolute geniuses and probably don't get paid nearly enough to teach the classes they teach. Other people should not be teaching classes. And if you're in a class and you don't think that teacher is doing a good enough job for you, or you just don't get it, and maybe you need to be tutored, there's alternatives to just sitting there and just suffering through a class. I've gotten up and walked out of classes. Add AI. I'm proud of the fact that I got 2 teachers fired because the horrible job they were doing. Yeah. And one of them, I gave them 2 weeks. 3 weeks. I gave them 3 weeks to improve on the class. And by the 3rd week, I was like, that's it. And I got up and I walked out. Wow. And I remember going to the head of the department and saying, I do not know what this person thinks that they're doing, and I'm not a stupid person. I have no idea what they're teaching. And that was the last quarter for them. And then the other person was somebody who was just a terrible person who just made people feel horrible for not being them.
I think I know who you're talking about. They shall not be named, but everyone that graduated with me definitely knows who you're talking about. Yeah.
But like I said, if you're lucky, you come across somebody like Douglas Kirk or Marjan Hormozi or Vladimir Zimakov. And no matter how good you are as an artist, you're now better because they've imparted to you something simple, a technique, a way of learning how to use your eyes, about how to just be patient, how to crumple it up and throw it away and start again and not kick yourself for doing so. But that is part of the job. It's a golden age for everybody calling themselves artists.
Literally, it truly is.
And that's nice and all, but I think it's important to point out the difference between somebody who likes drawing, and I like drawing, and somebody who suffers to make sure that it is what it's supposed to be. And professional doesn't always mean getting paid. Professional means how you do it, how you go about the process of doing it, the discipline, the commitment, the pushing yourself. You know when you've done something that sucks. and I've known people who have looked at their stuff and gone, well, that's just wonderful. And it's like, no, it's not. It's really not. I'm sure you needed the encouragement from yourself, but you also need to be honest. Don't give up your critical thinking skills. I think Johnny Depp's performance in Ed Wood is probably the best example of an artist who loses touch with reality, because he'd look at the stuff that he's making, this horrible thing happening in front of the camera, and he'd just go,
ship it.
Perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. It's like, it's a pie plate on fire. How is that perfect?
Gosh.
Never give up. Never stop pushing yourself to get better. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to school.
Yeah.
Then again, it might. But ask advice. Just don't ask me.
Well, on that note, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Do you have any pluggables before we wrap up today?
Any what now?
Where can we find pluggables? Do you have an Instagram? Do you have a place? Your stuff, like, tell us about your books.
I am the devil you know.
On Amazon.
I am the devil you know on Instagram. I never post anything on Instagram. I don't know why I bother having an Instagram. I'm always in a perpetual state of wanting to market myself and never doing it. I have 2 books on Amazon.com. The Big Book of Monsters, Volume 1. Volume 2 is coming. Get off my back. And The Night Parade, both by Chad Odell Roberts on Amazon.com. I have a Twitter account that's been shut down.
Don't at me.
And another one I am not going to identify because I don't want them to shut that one down.
So we'll follow you.
I'm not necessarily a good person. I am descended from pirates, and I once smuggled a piano into Mexico. So
we're going to have to do a second episode for that.
I'm not necessarily a role model, but you can buy my book. It's on sale. It was number 97 in encyclopedias and reference books for a long time.
Oh my goodness.
On the top 100.
That's so cool. You were the coolest. Thank you so much.
You're the coolest.
Smitten. I am humbled by your experience, and I really just thank you again for just sharing, for being vulnerable, for being here. I really appreciate it.
So for someone who didn't even bother to put pants on for this interview, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for asking my opinion on this, and thank you for taking the time to. I know you're just starting off doing this, but trying to spearhead the effort to actually not only get people to answer for things they've done, like getting people hugely into debt, but to help other people to learn from not from our mistakes, but from our experiences.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, not even we learn from our mistakes. But
I'm trying.
if you can learn from experience, that's better than learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
So, good seeing you. Hopefully we'll talk
Good to
again.
see you.
Maybe next time we'll talk about video games or something.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop the recording. Goodbye.
Goodbye.